Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week, the most ridiculous car in the entire game is the meta car. It's the Bugatti Veyron. And so, because of that, only one or two cars can compete whatsoever. So, let's get into it. In the current BOP, the Ferrari is one of only two cars I've found that can really compete with the Bugatti. It can set similar times in time trial, but when it comes to the race, nothing is safe from a Bugatti in the draft. On a positive note for all you Ferrari fans, you don't have to worry. There's no strategy needed for this week's race. I set a lap pretty quickly last night and I was able to get it to 75th position. I was actually 2/10 off of my optimal, and I know I could squeeze a lot more out of that. Considering the fact that we have one almost in the top 10, the Ferrari's looking good for your qualifying time. The race itself is of course a different story, so we'll get into that after the qualifying lap. Starting all the way on the inside, as you cross the start-finish line, you want to track out and look for this flag safety light here on the fence. Some people go super wide following the tire marks that are on the ground. I like to kind of just go almost in a straight line, sometimes a straight line if you can manage it, because you'll have much better braking power and you'll be able to brake a little bit later. Your goal is to get down to second gear, get as close as you can to that barrier on the inside, and get on the throttle right as you pass that barrier. You want to get on full throttle, not hesitate, and not lift. This is probably one of the most important sections because most people mess it up and you can really take advantage of a sliding Veyron there. Cross over to the left as soon as you can, and I'm actually going to give you three things to keep your eyes on. First is this lamppost on the left, second is the one marker on the right, and third is this tiny dot that you see right here. It's important to have lots of different references because you won't be able to see that dot if you're following someone closely or if you're defending on the inside. That mark on the ground is fantastic when it comes to time trials, but when it comes to racing close to anyone, it's going to be impossible to see. So you want to be able to approximate your position based on the other things that you can see pretty much at any given time. I start turning in almost immediately, and I try to slowly downshift. Each time when I downshift, it should let the car turn in a little bit more, and then get back up to second gear after you hit that apex. You really want to make sure that you do not lift off the throttle once you touch it because it's going to be full throttle until the next braking zone. You're going to move yourself to the right side of the track here, and this left-handed kink is going to be full throttle. Position yourself all the way on the left and look for this access road right here. There's another little dot on the ground. You can see right there, and that's a really good place to brake, but of course you're not going to be able to see that in the race, so just brake before you hit the end of that access road. You want to aim kind of for the middle of the track, but dip down to first again, hit the apex, and get on the throttle solidly. You'll see that I really hesitated on the throttle, and I actually lost more than a tenth just in that single corner alone. It would have actually been faster if I had missed the apex, but got solidly on the throttle without hesitating. Move yourself to the right side of the track, and once again we have a nice little access road. There is a drain that you can see that is almost exactly where you want to brake here on the right. However, you won't be able to see that when you're racing, so just brake before you get to the yellow curb. What I want to do is get to second gear and get on the throttle as early as I can, and it's more important to get on the throttle fully early and even go wide here than it is to try to keep a tight line there. Since it's a very long full throttle section, speed and acceleration are going to be the most important things here. In general, whoever gets on the throttle earliest wins, and when you're racing against a Veyron, who's going to have incredible power, you want to make sure that you do everything you can to give yourself an advantage. If they're behind you, you're probably going to be a sitting duck unless they get a really bad exit, and if you're behind them and you nail it right, you should be able to stick with them and potentially pass them if they make a mistake. Start looking for these numbered boards early. It's really easy just to miss them because you've been on the straight for so long, but when you get all the way past that flag safety light, that's when you're going to brake. I like to get down to fifth gear and turn in once I get past the one board, then get to fourth as I go over this curb, and you want to play with the brake, get off the brake just a little bit as you turn so you free up the grip in the front tires, but then gently get on the throttle as early as you can because again, this is just a really long full throttle section. If you see how much I cut on the portions of the curb, you can go a little bit further on both entry and exit, but don't push it too much. If you're not gentle with your throttle or brake application, you can also make the car jump or spin on those curbs, and obviously you don't want that. Hugging the inside is absolutely the best way to go. Going wide is not going to save you any speed, it's going to be much further distance. However, if you want to go really wide when you're going to start a new lap, you can gain maybe a mile per hour. Alright, here we go, full speed. We're going to look for this flag safety light on the outside and then try to cut a straight line in the braking zone. Get down to second gear, as close to this barrier as you can, and then again, full throttle, no hesitation, because it's really easy to lose time in pretty much any of these corners if you hesitate. Remember all of the track markings, get yourself down to second gear, dip it to first just to rotate, and then back up to second gear, being gentle on the throttle, but of course quick and without hesitations. You can be smooth and quick, just don't slam your foot on that throttle, and don't be making any kind of extra moves with your steering. Just be smooth, but be quick. You can definitely get away with braking a little bit later here. You want to start turning in and aiming for the middle of the track until you really tuck it in to hit that apex. You want to hit the apex later than I did because again I lost a tenth there. If you're really talented on the brakes, you could possibly keep it in third gear for longer, and then you'd be able to dip it into second and get on the throttle a little bit cleaner and carry more speed because I actually lost another tenth there. Like I said in the breakdown, it's actually okay to go wide as you exit that corner as long as you're getting on the throttle super early, especially if you're in a race condition. If you lose a little bit of time, as long as you don't go extremely wide and all the way up to the wall, then you're probably going to be fine, especially if you're in their draft. You're going to catch up before the bus stop probably. Try to carry as much speed as you can through the bus stop. You can do that by downshifting a little bit later, and also don't lift off the brake too suddenly. That's a big mistake a lot of people make, and they lose control of their car. It's not always because they're going too fast. Sometimes they're going the appropriate speed, but they lift off the brake too suddenly, and that causes the weight to transfer as they're going over a curb, and it just gets really messy. Like I said before, hug the inside as you're finishing your lap, but if you know this lap wasn't good and you want to get like one more extra mile per hour, go wide and then cut on the inside as you start your next lap. Bam, there you go. Unfortunately this week, your greatest enemy might not be the meta car, but actually the servers. If you've been experiencing really crazy lag spikes, you are not alone. It appears that pretty much worldwide there's been an issue since the last update, and unfortunately everyone is experiencing really weird lag spikes and connection issues. I haven't had a single race that didn't have any connection issues for about 3 weeks now, so hopefully they're going to figure it out. I have had word that they're aware of it, so I do trust that they'll fix it soon enough. Anyways, we definitely saw a lot of the meta car this week, but I'm also really pleased to see a lot of people are driving the anti-meta cars even before a real anti-meta car has been established. I saw a lot of variety for these races this week. That ends up helping me out a lot because I can actually see how these cars perform as I'm driving against them, not just driving myself. So it helped to narrow it down, and I actually got this race done on stream. I talk about this all the time, but I pretty much just always check up when it comes to T1 of any multiplayer race, any kind of multiplayer race online, because people are crazy. The Veyron was so fast, however, that I didn't need to check up whatsoever, and so I almost flew through with too much momentum, and luckily we were okay. Unfortunately, our buddy Andrew Racing was not okay, but at least he wasn't backwards. When it comes to lap 1 of Daytona, you can pretty much always assume that any of the hairpins, and as you get onto the oval portion, they're going to be pretty crazy, so just be careful. Defend yourself, and don't go for any super risky moves unless you're feeling extra brave. The people behind me were not really close, so I felt a little bit more comfortable checking up a lot and just giving everyone in front space, so I didn't contribute to any kind of craziness. It's just the first lap, and even though there are only 10 laps, it's still quite a long race for things to develop, so there's no real use in being really aggressive. If you saw that little bit of a shift, that's actually kind of the nicest, the most gentle lag spike that we've gotten. So I'm sure if you've been racing, you've experienced worse than that. But I was pretty sure that cars were going to start disappearing. When that happens, I just pretend like everyone else is gone, because the game does do a pretty good job of ghosting. Not all the time, but there's really nothing you can do. So just try not to lose too much momentum. Most cars are just going to be predictable when it comes to where they're going to be after a lag spike like that. But yeah, not much you can do. Just keep going. I can't remember who MJP is. I don't know if it's a buddy of ours, but in the start of the lobby he said, the anti-meta car. I was like, wait a second. Has he figured out a car to defeat my anti-meta car? And then I thought, oh, the GTR used to be really powerful, and it's not anymore, unfortunately. If you make a mistake and you leave even space for 2 tires on the inside there, people can take advantage of that just like I did. And if there's slipstream ahead on the line, then it can be really disastrous losing the inside line there. One thing to remember when defending into T1 is you can still brake pretty much in a straight line. Just aim a little bit more to the inside so you know that anyone on the outside has space and you don't cause any collisions. I realize I just said collisions instead of collisions, but I'm not one to back down from my mistakes, so we're leaving it in. Another car that I had considered for the anti-meta car was actually the Huracan, which we see directly in front of us, driven by our good buddy Boku. I had underestimated the Lamborghini in the Le Mans race that we had a few months ago because under the BOP it has really low power. However, I forget that this game simulates wind, or I should just say aerodynamics, not just the wind, aerodynamics really nicely. So the fact that it is really aerodynamically sound means that it can have a pretty good high top speed, even though it doesn't have a lot of power. It also has that all-wheel drive grip that really helps in the Group 4 class, and as you can see, Boku's doing really well here. You probably saw the weird lag spikes through the infield on this lap here, and it actually poses a unique problem where we are right now as well. Sometimes when the lag hits, it makes it seem like the cars are just slightly offline from where they actually are, so it's hard to determine if those two are actually off the inside line or the lag just made it seem that way. Another consideration that you might be aware of is you can actually feel the aerodynamic differences when cars are lagging. I've had races where cars are jumping all over the place and I can feel the wind differences each time that's happening. So with all that said, I wasn't sure if Grove was actually high on the bank here or if it just looked like that, so I decided to go for a chance anyways. I figured if I lost a lot of speed from it, then I'd be able to slot back in behind Boku again and then possibly make a pass into turn 1, but it turns out the Lamborghini's top speed is not very strong, so I was able to actually make that move stick, which was surprising to me. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that there were going to be sliding Veyrons on T1, and while the Veyron does handle really well, it is still incredibly heavy. So if you make a little bit of a mistake, if you unsettle your car going into T1, it's going to slide really, really far, more so than any of the other Group 4 cars. So they'll have to be a lot more careful than you. Of course, you still want to be careful, but if they make a mistake and you make a mistake, they're probably going to take it a lot worse than you do. So now we're in a prime position to really test the anti-meta. We've got a Veyron behind and we've got a Veyron ahead. If you're close enough within the slipstream, you should be able to keep up with a Veyron, and of course if they make a mistake, you could even pull off a pass leading into the next corner. However, if you are in a Veyron slip, and there's another Veyron behind you close enough, they're going to be able to pass you on the straight. No matter what you do, you want to defend on the inside here because it's going to take a lot more speed and a lot more power to pass on the outside on the high part of the bank right here. Again, I didn't know if Grove was actually that high on the bank, so I kind of started inching towards him, but I was a little bit iffy because I didn't want to compromise my speed, so it was really weird when it came to the connection. There's another thing to consider when it comes to the Veyron and battling the Veyron. Not everyone drives manual, and even those who do drive manual don't necessarily know the optimal shift point for every car. If you watch any of the streamers who are competitive, or if you watch me, or if you've been following my videos, you may know that a lot of cars have a really different shift point, and with the Veyron, it's somewhere near the middle of the digital tachometer. I suspect the guy behind me did not know that, but I also think that the Ferrari is really good through the bus stop, so if you can get a really good line through there, then as you can see, you can actually catch up to the Veyron. You may also see, however, that Budweiser Can lost his position to Grove, and again, like I mentioned before, if they make a mistake, they're going to slide way off. So it was really interesting to see how all this was developing. Two of the anti-meta cars now with one attacking meta car, and it looked like we were going to be able to stay away. It was really unfortunate seeing that Budweiser Can made the mistake there, and I thought that DE Birch had pushed him wide, but I think that was entirely a connection because he snapped all the way to the inside, and then suddenly they both had a lot of space. So be really patient with people this week. If you think people are being dirty, definitely look at the replay, watch their inputs, because there's a chance that it's just a connection thing. As you can see, DE Birch is giving him all the space he needs in the subsequent corners if you look in the rear view, so I really don't think that he was pushing him wide. I think it was entirely a connection thing. Either way, with Mike making that mistake, Budweiser Can making that little mistake, and DE Birch having those connection issues, we were home free for a bit. Now, not a lot happens in the next couple laps, but I do want to show you this. As we were getting onto the oval, Dpr was 8/10 behind. As we get to the bus stop, he's going to cut that down to about 6/10. Like I said before, I'm not certain if the Ferrari is actually superior at the bus stop, but it is kind of a skill gate. If you can focus really hard on getting good at that bus stop, you're going to have an advantage. I've seen massive mistakes at the bus stop consistently on all levels of play. We're talking in the top split, in manufacturer, in nations. I see it in iRacing. If you can consistently get through the bus stop, you're going to have an advantage. The delta only went from about 6/10 to a little bit under 7/10, but that was enough to break up the momentum that he had. If you can see going into T1, he is only 2/10 behind. If that bus stop weren't there, if we didn't do as well on the bus stop, he would be in front of us by then. But since we did nail it, he's still behind. Now, if we jump past the infield, we've now caught up to the group ahead. That means I've got slipstream from Damien, who happens to be in the other anti-meta car that I had almost chosen. As we got onto the oval, we were just under 4/10, and now we're just at 3.5/10 as we're approaching the bus stop. Now, if I tried to pass Damien here, I probably wouldn't be able to because Damien's incredible, on top of the fact that it would slow both of us enough that Dpr would be able to get us really easily. Giving him that bump draft late is actually a really sketchy move with most people, but I was certain that Damien would be able to handle it. And unfortunately, bump drafting has been giving SR downs to people, meaning that your sportsmanship rating can actually drop and it can reset you if you bump draft people too much, so use it really sparingly. Since I know Damien is a much faster driver than me, my plan is just to bump draft him again. However, if I had a huge run on him there, I would have just passed him and then allowed him to pass me as soon as he went for an attempt, rather than doing any kind of battling. If you can just kind of leapfrog each other, it can have the same effect as a slight bump draft because it doesn't allow the person behind to really catch up very much, and you don't really lose any time as long as you're not battling through the corners. I thought that I bump drafted him too late and it pushed him off the line, but I think it was just lag there. So now right behind Damien, Dpr is again more than 4/10 behind, and I know that Damien's going to be able to go through here really quickly, potentially make a move on the guy ahead, but maybe not before the oval, and as long as we stay clean throughout here, we should be able to hold off Dpr. Another part of your racing strategy and your racecraft could be your social interactions with people. Let's say I didn't actually know Damien, but we'd raced each other enough to know essentially what we would be doing. If you just send people messages before or after the race, talk to them, or if you do develop a friendship with people, you can then coordinate to work against the meta car like this. This is one of those times where you can consider that maybe you won't get your friend's position, but perhaps both of you can get the position of the person ahead. Either way, if we look at how this race is developed, Damien is well within the slipstream of the car ahead of him, and from the last time we were at this part of the track, we are now a little bit further ahead of Dpr, so this current strategy that we're using is working to go against the metacar. This is something I probably haven't talked too much about in these videos, but when it comes to racing your friends, a lot of times people who aren't really experienced with racing will be a little bit too nice with their friends. There's a time to work with your friends and there's a time to just work for yourself. And when you are racing your friends, if you want to improve yourself and if you want to help your friends improve, the very best thing you can do is fight them as hard as you possibly can. It's like martial arts. I taught martial arts for 14 or 15 years. And one of the things that I struggled with at the very beginning was the thought of hurting my friends. But the very best thing you can do in martial arts is to try to beat the crap out of your friends within reason. Because if you aren't giving them your best, you aren't giving them an opportunity to learn how to defend against the best. By fighting your friends as hard as you possibly can, you are both going to benefit from that in martial arts and in racing. So with that said, Damien, of course, is taking his opportunity to then get ahead of Spartan Big Ice, potentially just leaving me in the dust, and that's exactly what he should do. Because he was able to get ahead so cleanly, there was no time lost when it came to passing Spartan Big Ice, and so it didn't affect my momentum whatsoever, and Dpr was now 7/10 behind. One thing that we saw a lot of, especially when it came to the very back of the field, was a lot of people that didn't have a lot of either, I guess, racecraft intelligence, or they just didn't really care. There were a lot of people who were fighting tooth and nail to defend for like 14th position. With how close I was to Spartan Big Ice, I could have potentially made some kind of crazy dive or been more aggressive and tried to pass him leading up to the end of the infield, but that's not going to help us, especially with one of the meta cars behind. If you battle so much at the beginning of the race or any point where you're going to completely lose the pack ahead, and especially if you don't have a meta car that can just hold its own without the slipstream, then you're really fighting for nothing. If you want to get wins and you're fighting from the mid pack, then it's really important to choose your battles. Speaking of choosing your battles, I'm not sure exactly what JL Matos did right there, but they got a penalty, they got a really bad exit, and all of that caused them to lose a ton of positions. I think it was probably just a mistake in the bus stop, but either way, we benefited from it. When it comes to passing into T1, people on the inside who are defending can sometimes make a really big mistake because it's really difficult to see exactly where you are and place your braking point correctly. And with that, Spartan Big Ice made a really big mistake, and I was able to capitalize on it and get right back behind Damien. Jumping forward to the end of the race, I would really love to make the excuse that I was just trying to practice more racecraft intelligence by not putting too many moves on Damien, but in reality, Damien is just incredibly fast and I didn't have an opportunity to pass him because he's faster than me. Now here's one of the really funny things that you see when you race with your friends. You can pull this kind of thing off in real races too, but it's really frowned upon. But Damien is just letting me pass here because if I pass here, he's going to be able to get a run going to the finish line, and he's going to be able to take this position. If I stayed behind him through the bus stop, I would probably be able to get him at the finish line, but since he left me there, he was able to get me. And the fact that I got a penalty really sealed the deal. But yeah, it's really funny. You can use these kind of tricks when you're racing with your friends, but be prepared for repercussions if you do that in any kind of official race. Also, I want to take this opportunity to thank Damien. It's been really cool racing with him. I think I've really only raced him this last year, but I genuinely think getting to race him all the time for the dailies is actually making me a faster driver. So thank you, Damien. You're a legend. And with that, a respectable 11 position move from 15th to 4th. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you liked what you saw. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe because I'll be making one of these videos every single week. Thank you.